Welcome to the Elk Talk Podcast with Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobson. Presented by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
The goal is, what little you and I know about elk hunting, we share with people.
I've got an elk building, it's like 120 yards away. What do I do? First off, the thought would never cross my mind when an elk's being 120 yards away to call anybody on a cell phone.
All elk?
All the time? Only elk?
Only elk.
Well, it's us having conversations, so we usually go down some rabbit holes, but
If you hunt with Corey Jacobson, you will find the landscape is full of rabbit holes. We're just going to make this up as we go.
and you look at it like, oh, that's a target-rich environment. But if you're trying to single one out, a solo target there is much easier to go into than a big group.
We record everything, so there's no BSing, no lying, no faking it with us.
Did we hit the record
I
button?
thought I forgot to hit the record button. If you want to know something about elk hunting, this probably isn't the podcast to listen to. Should we give them a list of all the other podcasts where they might learn something? Corey Jacobson, how you doing this morning?
You know, if I was any better, there would have to be two of me.
Whoa. Holy smokes, you are good. You're like way out in front. You're one of those guys that's so far out in front that I think I'm actually ahead of you. You're just getting ready to lap me for the second or third time. That's how far out in front you are. Holy
Well,
smokes.
this is kind of a change for us. We're recording this podcast early in the morning. Well, not early in the morning, but in the morning. And typically we record in the afternoon. So by then we've got a good idea of what the day has been like. Right now, it's a clean slate in front of us. So it's a good day right now.
Oh, it's going to be a great day. First day I woke up in about 6 months that it wasn't snowing. So
I know, isn't that the truth?
yeah. So everything else is going really good. I went through a bunch of emails that we got. And, well, first of all, an apology is in order because folks email us and say, when's the next episode? When's the next episode? And the apology is that sometimes I'm traveling, sometimes Corey's traveling, or sometimes some emergency pops up where when we're scheduled to do it, it doesn't work out. So sorry about that, folks. We had a gap.
People ask all the time, is there a schedule? Do you guys have like a set schedule when you release podcasts? And the answer is kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I apologize for that, but we'll make up for it.
We will.
So,
can we tell them? Can we give them a little bit of a teaser of what's coming?
Yeah, you go right ahead.
All right. So we've typically we try to release a podcast episode every other week. So I don't know. I mean, theoretically, it would be on a Monday, and every 2 weeks there'd be a new one. And like Randy said, sometimes we get behind, our schedules don't sync up, and it gets tough. But starting next week, there's going to be a little mini series that I'm going to do in between each of those 2-week episodes. So theoretically, once again, there should be an episode every week from now until the end of September. So it'll just be a shorter episode of me sharing a hunting story and a tactic or a strategy from that story that was instrumental. So it'll be some entertainment through the story and some education through the sharing of the tactic, and
Cool.
bring us a little bit more elk hunting content to get us excited leading up to elk season here.
Yeah. You're going to do it through September 30th or up until September 1st?
Yeah, well, we're going to do it through the end of hunting, like through the end of September. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, I knew, you know what they say, Corey, if you want to get something done, call the busiest person in town. So
Totally.
that's why you got called to do this.
I was going to say I've got an outline of each of the stories, at least the hunt. You know, I kind of went through and picked the top 12 hunts that I could think of that were educational and somewhat entertaining. So I've got that laid out.
Okay.
I've got the first podcast, the first episode done.
Ooh.
It's recorded and ready to go. So it's in the hopper here. And I'm looking at the next 11 going, all right, how am I going to get these done? But I think that's the key. You've just got to start. And once you get started, you figure out a way to get everything else. It'll work out. So I've got it started, and we'll be on schedule.
Cool. Well, appreciate you doing that. And the crew is probably saying, well, what's Randy going to do? Just sit there with his thumb in his ear for those spare weeks? Yep. That's the answer.
That works for me. Don't expect too much other than me just sharing a story, and they'll be shorter. They'll be probably 25 or 30 minutes an episode, I think.
Well, now that I'm back in town this week, you and I right now are podcast number 3 this week. I got another one right after this, and I have one tomorrow morning. Nice. Boy, I am a bag of hot air. Good thing I can just make it up and fake it. Because
what's crazy is you never say the same thing twice either. So
really, my wife says I repeat myself all the time.
No, I think your ability to come up with new content continually is unprecedented.
Well, maybe that's just because I don't know what I'm doing. You got to make a lot of mistakes to get it right. So I show all the mistakes before I finally get it right. So that just gives me...
You and me both. I just keep making the same mistake.
Well, we got a lot of really good emails. The email inbox was stuffed. One of them I'm going to have to address here because on our last podcast, I talked about how Colorado folks should work to increase their access to their state trust lands. And man, between the Elk Talk podcast inbox and the number of, what do they call them? DMs on Instagram or whatever. I got people who I don't know how to do that. So they're like, what did you say that all these people are asking for the roadmap of how to increase access in Colorado? I'm like, I don't know. I'll just tell them I'm going to do it on another podcast. I'll lay out the roadmap. So I think we'll cover that today. Well, we still have everybody listening, Corey. Can I tell you what I like the least about April and early May? I love this time of year, but there are some things that make it just an annoying time of year.
Really?
That's when everybody tells me, "Oh, you should be out turkey hunting."
Well, it's just like elk hunting, isn't it?
Yeah, right. How many times have you heard that? Right? Turkey hunting and elk hunting they're the same thing. Okay. Here, people are going to say, well, Newberg, you're a terrible turkey hunter. That's why you don't like it. You're right. Raising my hand here, admitting I am a terrible turkey hunter. I've shot 2 of them in my life, which is, in a court case, would be provided as evidence that there are at least 2 individuals of every species that somehow are way, way below average. And I happen to bump into both of them. But I'm thinking of all the things going on right now that if I didn't have a bum arm, I would be doing. I would be walleye fishing. I would be spring bear hunting. I mean, the list goes on and on. You'd be collecting shed antlers.
Shed hunting. Yep. Anything but turkey hunting. I mean, that's just, and I get it. You got, spring fever, cabin fever, whatever going on. You want to get out. You want to, take your shotgun out or your bow, and turkey hunting just seems like a good thing to do. And it's great. If you like turkey hunting, there's nothing wrong with that. Just don't compare it to elk hunting. Please don't compare it to elk hunting. That's an insult.
My crew, they know how little interest I have in elk hunting or turkey hunting. So what did they schedule for next week? The entire office is going out on a 5-day turkey hunt. And they informed me that I'm going also. I'm like, guys,
wow.
You might want to run that by me. Oh no, we already got it planned. We got the film permit. We got the storyline. We got. Okay. So I go to physical therapy the other day. I'm like, hey, can I shoot a shotgun yet? They're like, no, you're not shooting a shotgun. If you do that and you mess it up, your bear hunt in late May might be out the window. So what am I going to do while I'm there? I didn't even buy a turkey tag now that they told me I can't shoot a shotgun. What am I there for? Comic relief? Or so anyhow, I think it's a ploy on their part to try to convince me how exciting turkey hunting can be, and maybe it can be, but
it can be. I mean, it's listen. You can call in a turkey similar to being able to call in an elk. But when a turkey comes in and gobbles in front of you 20 yards, it's nothing like an elk coming in and bugling 20 yards in front of you. You shoot a turkey, it flops, you go up and pick it up, throw it over your shoulder, and you walk back to the truck. This is not an elk hunt by any means. Yes, there are some similarities. You're in the woods, you have a tag, you are hunting, but I just, people say all the time, well, turkey hunting is a poor man's elk hunt, or turkey hunting and elk hunting are just alike. And man, there's just no comparison. Yes, if you like turkey hunting, go turkey hunting. Be out in the woods in the spring. But like Randy said, I would rather be standing in my driveway shooting my bow, or doing just about anything, poking pine needles under my fingernails.
That puts turkey hunting pretty far down your list. I don't know if it's that far down my list, but
I love shed hunting in the spring. This spring has been a very frustrating spring for shed hunting, but I would still pick it over turkey hunting. I would be out wolf hunting right now over turkey hunting.
Okay.
Morel mushrooms hopefully will be popping up soon. Bear hunting is open and the bears are coming out. There's a whole list of things I could think of that would take the cake before turkey hunting.
And now we've upset about half of the audience that thinks turkey hunting is just right up there with elk hunting. So we're going to have to hit the reboot button and rename the podcast and call it something else, because half of our audience just left.
So that means there's only one left.
No, I get why people want to be out in the woods, and that's great.
Totally.
But for me, a couple things have in my adult life for 35 years, I worked 100 hours a week up until April 15th. And the last thing I was going to do is drive 8 hours, sleep in a tent, and get up at 4 a.m. to hear a bird chuckle or gobble or whatever the heck they do when they're on their roost, honk or quack. And I was just always so tired. You couldn't have got me out of bed at that time. So the evolution of my adult life was such that I never really got into turkey hunting. And spring bear hunting is a great warm afternoon activity. So I gravitated more towards spring bear hunting than I ever did turkey hunting. And then I have this wife where, 40 to 60 days of summer are mandatory fishing days in order to maintain marital harmony. So if I came home and said, honey, after all this tax season, I think I'm going turkey hunting for a week, I better bring a whole lot of stuff. I better bring a whole Mayflower van full of stuff, because the odds are when I come home, I'm not going to have a mailing address anymore. So, and I know everybody else has a different, series of life circumstances and events that maybe that's why they got into turkey hunting. But I just
and that's the disclaimer. There is nothing wrong with turkey hunting. If somebody enjoys turkey hunting, that's great. For me, though, there are a lot of things this time of year that I place in front of turkey hunting. And for me to actually go turkey hunting, there would have to be a lot of things going wrong in my life to go turkey hunting.
And I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, how did this end up on the Elk Talk podcast? Well, when we start getting emails over the course of years that say, you guys never talk about the parallels between turkey hunting and elk hunting. When are you guys going to talk about how turkey hunting is such great practice for elk hunting? And so it's like, all right, turkey season's coming up. what do you say, Corey? We finally address this turkey hunting versus elk hunting thing and take the risk that half of our audience is mad at us now. So that's why we've never addressed it, folks. Is one, neither of us are big turkey hunters, and two, there's just other things we think are more pertinent to the endeavor of elk hunting. So can turkeys?
No, and I think
can turkeys smell?
And talking about turkey and elk, whenever I do a seminar or something teaching how to use elk calls, the first thing I tell people, especially if they're from back east, how many of you know how to use a turkey call? And if they raise their hand, I'm like, forget everything you know about using a turkey call, because using an elk call is going to be completely opposite. So, people will be like, I should be able to pick it up pretty quickly. I've used turkey calls my whole life. I've used a diaphragm for turkey calls. It's like, okay, you're going to have a really hard time learning how to call elk then, because it's going to be completely opposite. So there is that kind of gets in the way of becoming a good elk caller sometimes, is you have to completely reprogram everything you've learned about using a diaphragm call to be able to switch and call elk. And I know there are some people from back east that I know that can absolutely master both a turkey call and an elk call, but they'll tell you as well, they're completely different.
Yeah. Our buddy Bo Brooks was in town here about 3 weeks ago doing a turkey calling seminar, and I thought, well, I'll just go there to say hello to Bo, and he is one of those guys you talk about. He's the Charlie Daniels
the best of both worlds.
So, but well, now that we've kind of cleared the deck of all the things that have no relevance to elk hunting, but must have had some relevance to the audience to email us enough times to say that. What's your shed hunting update these days?
Oh man, I was hoping you wouldn't ask.
Because for me, shed hunting, I think I'd go turkey hunting before I'd go hunting for shed antlers. I know that that's going to put you into orbit, but that's
not at all. I actually just got back from a trip. Cameraman John and I went and spent 3 days in the backcountry. We backpacked in, then we rafted across a river, then we backpacked in a little farther and set up a camp.
What?
And I found 6 antlers hanging in trees on this trip. I don't know if I've ever found more than one hanging in a tree. I found 6 antlers hanging in trees. So my whole thought was, Randy Newberg's been here. I don't know anybody else who hangs antlers in trees, but there were antlers in so many trees. You're glassing across a canyon with 18-power binoculars and a white antler hanging in a black tree stump, or just hanging in a ponderosa pine stands out. I mean, it just almost glows there. And I couldn't believe how many I was spotting, and in completely different areas. It would take somebody a day and a half of walking to get from one area to the next. So I know that same person's covered that entire country. And for a shed hunter, anytime I find an antler, so if I find a chalky old antler that's not even worth packing out, I'm going to hide it. I'm going to throw it in a creek. I'm going to put it under a log. I don't want anybody else to find that antler and get excited about, hey, there might be antlers in here. I'm going to come back during shed season and see if I can find an antler. Well, these people that hang them in trees, all they're doing is putting a big beacon out there telling everybody who comes through here, there are so many antlers in this area that I have to just start hanging them in trees. So my goal was to go around and find all the antlers in trees and take them out and hide them.
Oh gosh! The remaining half of the audience that we didn't get mad at us because of turkey hunting, now I've got them mad at us or mad at me because I have no use for picking antlers. I get it. I mean, it's Marcus here. Him and Jace, who work for me, they go all over the place looking for shed antlers. I'm like, you guys are crazy. No, it's good exercise. It gets me out in the hills. It's like, all right, I get it. Okay.
And honestly, I've you hike, you're by yourself, you get literally from daylight till dark every day hiking, and you really get inside your own mind. You can start thinking about things, and you don't get a chance to do that. Like even when you're hunting elk or something, there's some downtime, but you just don't have that time to disconnect from everything. And I was like, okay, why do I shed hunt? Why do I enjoy shed hunting?
Mm-hmm.
And I got thinking there's a lot of things that people enjoy that just, for whatever reason, the sheds are the draw. That's the motivation for me to get up in the morning, hike 3,000 vertical feet up a mountain, cover 10 or 12 miles in a day, come back completely exhausted. If I was to look up at that mountain and not have a purpose to climb it, I'd never climb it.
No, me
but
either.
I climbed 3 of them 3 days in a row with the hope that there would be an antler on one of them. And this year's just been tough. I thought this year would be great with the heavier snowpack. It would hold the animals down a little lower, but the snow line where we go seems to be the same as it always is. The elk are as healthy as they've always been. They seem to have left their winter grounds at the same time they normally do. The difference this year is every ridge I've been on, there have been boot tracks on it already.
Oh, really? So you're getting the leftovers.
If I'm lucky, yeah. And I put trail cameras out to monitor the trails more than the animals in there. And there was one of my areas, a guy went in on March 23rd and came out on March 26th with an absolute backpack load of giant brown elk antlers in this area.
Really?
So,
March
23rd? And March through the 26th, which I know they drop. The bigger bulls will drop that middle to last part of March, but I like to wait until at least the first week of April. So a few more elk have dropped. And because what happens is you go in too early and it ends up, you find that big load of the big antlers, but only about maybe 20% of the elk have dropped by then. So the other 80% get scattered.
Yeah.
And that means that's what I'm finding now is a scattered antler here. And then a mile later, there's the other side laying on a, brushy hillside because they aren't just laying out on the open hillsides now. They've been pushed into the timber. And so it just makes it harder to find them. They don't drop just all on one hillside like they really could if they were left, which I get it. It's competitive. People are out doing it. But it's leading to Idaho just passed a bill that gives the Fish and Game the authority to create a shed season.
Whoa.
And, I in a place like southeast Idaho this year where the mule deer fawn mortality was literally probably 100%. Mortality on adult does in that area was probably 40 to 50%. They need something to regulate activity in the field during a hard winter in certain areas like that. And so that's what they've assured us, that they aren't going to do a statewide, just blanket season, but it gives them the authority to be able to implement something on an emergency basis when it's needed, which I support. I've just seen shed seasons in so many other states that are a failure because of enforcement. And I'm like, we already have laws on harassment of wildlife. We can't enforce that because we don't have enough in the field of enforcement from the Fish and Game Department, and adding one more law that we can't pick up sheds during a certain period of time. Nobody's going to be out there to be able to enforce it. Plus, every shed hunter overnight turns into a coyote hunter or a bird watcher. So if they can still be out there, they just can't be legally picking up sheds. And I think Wyoming's a good case of they shut down the whole western side of the state pretty much on national forest. The Forest Service is involved with it to protect the wintering big game and saying you can't even step foot on national forest until May 1st at 6 a.m. And just this week they came out and extended that, an emergency extension of that closure to May 15th in all of western Wyoming, with the exception of Teton County, which is where we're going to be heading in just a couple days for the annual shed hunting opener in Wyoming, which will be the last year that as a non-resident we can participate, because they also passed a law that said non-residents have to wait 7 days after the opening of the shed season in the future before they get to go. So
well, good thing the walleyes are biting that time of year. I don't need to worry about it.
There you go.
I don't think anybody eats shed antler.
No, but we can eat a pretty good steak dinner if we find one antler. So
Really?
there's incentives, for everything we do. But I think at the end of the day, it's all just the motivating factor that gets us into the outdoors this
Yeah.
time of year and allows us to get a sunburn and enjoy those first rays of sunshine. The ground is finally, thawed out, and the ground is holding some heat now. So it feels good to lay down on until you look down and notice 6 ticks crawling up your arm because they're out in full force right now too.
Yeah. Well, I've never been bit by a tick sitting in my walleye boat, so we'll call
Really?
it no. I got to work into this summer routine. I get out of tax season, even though I don't do it that much anymore. I kind of get my exercise walking around my boat, doing stuff like that, standing up, reeling in a fish or something, and then I'll get spring bear hunting. When you drive a desk for a living, you got to break into it easy.
That's true. That's true.
We don't have much left in the way.
We talked about my wolf that I shot, right?
I don't know if we did. I can't remember. I think we were going to do that podcast that day, and then the schedules got blinked out because
we've got even a better story.
Really?
That I know we haven't shared yet, so we can
talk about wolf hunting a little. Let's hear it.
All right. Well, I shot a wolf in the beginning of March, and it was a pretty cool experience. It was a black one, first black one I've shot. But my son Isaac, who's in college, called and said, "Hey, I'm on spring break." This was the last week of March, and we don't have time to come all the way down and go shed hunting or anything, but you want to go shed hunting and wolf hunting? We can kind of meet somewhere in the middle. I said, sure. So I met him and his buddy for the day, and we took snowmobiles and went in over the top of a mountain and dropped down to the snow line on the other side. And as we're going down there, I noticed some pretty fresh wolf tracks going down the ridge. And so he and his buddy went one way and I went another way, and I came around the corner and there's really fresh wolf tracks going across the snow right on this ridge, fresh enough and in the manner that led me to believe they heard me coming and ran off the hill there. So they were plowing, through the snow, going down the hill and big strides. So I shut the snowmobile off and walked around the hill and let out a howl, and they started howling back about 400 yards away from me, just right there. So I spent 3 hours listening to them howl pretty much nonstop. And there were 2 of them up to my right and 1 way down the canyon to the left. And so I started moving in on the 2 to the right. And they were, like I said, just howling like crazy. And I think it ended up being a male and a female. And the male was really aggressive howling, and the female was doing this sound like a submissive whimpering and whining. And man, as soon as I started mimicking that, they went ballistic and came running in. I saw them at about 300 yards, and they were at a dead run coming at me. And where I was set up, I had like a 25 or 30 yard shooting lane in every direction, but I wouldn't see them until they popped out right there. Yeah. And so I've got the rifle up, I've got the scope dialed down to 4 power, and I'm just waiting to catch a glimpse, because I know as soon as they come out and see me move, they're going to turn tail and run. And meanwhile, this wolf that's way down the canyon is getting closer and closer, and he's howling. I mean, this is it's almost like being in the middle of a herd of elk. And the elk bugling, you're trying to figure out what they're interested in, but this one's coming from a long ways away. And all of a sudden I see the 2 that had been coming in, they're turning and they're running away from me. And I knew they didn't smell me. I knew they didn't pop out and see me, but they're running away. So I start doing my whimpering again, and I look and they stop, and they're like rolling around and biting at each other and just kind of playing there. And so I get the rifle set up, and I've got a pretty good opening. It's about 280 yards, and the big wolf turns and takes off running up the hill. And again, wolves never stand still, so it's not like they've seen me or anything, but this is my chance. I'm not going to get another shot at these ones. And the smaller one, the female, is still standing there and turns and starts walking up the hill. So I just lay the rifle across the log there and get a good rest and put the dot right on the back of her head as she's going up the hill and squeeze off. And as soon as I shoot, the branch on a little green red fir tree right in front of me splits in half and falls to the ground. So I didn't see the branch in front of me. I thought I was shooting over the top of it, but just the angle and everything, I ended up hitting the branch. And so immediately my thought is, I'll never get a shot at those two wolves again. Like, they've just been educated, and it's actually the first wolf I've ever shot at that I've missed. And I know that when you shoot at a wolf and miss, they just get so much smarter than they already are. So anyway, I'm sitting there in disgust thinking, I rushed that. I should have probably just waited. That other one was coming up. Well, the other one starts howling again, and they all start howling. As they separate, they all start howling. So I go back out and hike out to the ridge, and I radio over to Isaac. I'm like, hey, you guys finding any sheds? And he's like, no. And I said, well, I just missed a wolf, and at this time it's like 1 p.m. And I'm like, but there's one still howling down in the canyon. I'm like, I'm going to make a hike around and see if I can find any sheds, and then I'll radio you a little later and see what to do. So I make this big hike, and the whole time I'm hiking, I still hear this wolf howling down in the canyon there. The one that had come all the way up the canyon, he gets up close to there, and then he moved back into the back of the canyon. So at about 4 o'clock, I get out on this ridge, and I howl, and he answers probably 2 miles away back in this canyon. So I get on the radio, and I'm like, hey, Isaac, what's the plan? And he's like, we can't find anything. We're just about back to the snowmobile. And they're like, why don't you guys head over this way, and we'll see if we can get the wolves howling again. So we meet up by the snowmobiles there, and we're standing there, and I walk over the edge of the hill, and we stop, and they're like, there's a wolf howling over to our left. And I'm like, it can't be over to the left. That's where I just was. He was back in this canyon to the right here. That wolf covered 2 miles in about 15 minutes and is over on the ridge I had been howling on at him, howling over there looking for me. So as quickly as we can get set up there and start howling, within about 4 minutes, that wolf's standing 180 yards below us looking for us on the hill. He is just covering country trying to find this wolf that's in his territory to run him out of there.
Yeah.
And so Isaac's up above me, and he's like, hey, who's going to shoot? And I said, get down here and get set up. So he gets set up, and the wolf steps out, and it's just a beautiful, really light, almost white, not white, but, a really light gray colored silver wolf, and a giant male, just a big alpha male. And he shoots him at 180 yards, and the wolf tumbles down the hill about 60 yards, and it's dead there. So the really cool part is I've been a member for the Foundation for Wildlife Management for a handful of years now. And they have a reimbursement program. And in, I think, January or February, I signed Isaac up as a member. So we both got reimbursed for wolves this spring through the Foundation for Wildlife Management, which for Isaac, being a poor college kid, getting $1,000 reimbursement for shooting a wolf was a huge boon to his economic state right now.
Yeah. He's like, man, I can quit working. I'm just going to hunt wolves.
Well, you look at a $35 membership to join them, and that money goes to reimburse hunters who go out and trap and shoot wolves. But a $35 investment for a $1,000 payoff just 2 months later, I'm not a very good mathematician, but that's like is that 3,000 or some percent increase there, return on investment.
Yeah. I was going to say, if you started with 1,000 and ended up with 35, that's more like my investment portfolio. But
that's a shed hunting. That's shed hunting investment. That's how much you spend in gas to sell one antler that you find.
Wow. I need to get out and do more wolf hunting. I'm so fed up with being laid up with this bum arm. I hate it because it becomes a reason for why you get sedentary, even though people are like, well, what's left for you, Randy? You don't turkey hunt, you don't shed hunt, walleye fishing, you sit in a boat chair. How more sedentary could you be? That's probably a good question. I don't want to answer it, but so I don't have any cool stories like that, Corey. I was supposed to go beaver trapping. Outdoor Life was sending a guy out to go beaver trapping with me, but not allowed to do that now. So all I've been doing now is just doing a lot of e-scouting, trying to figure out how I might kill an elk this fall. But I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull that off either. I'll try. If you hear a little hiccup in the audio, folks, Corey decided that he thought he heard a wolf howl, so he had to drop what he's doing and run out the back door and make sure. So
I got so wound up telling that story there that I must have hit mute or something.
Must have. You somehow you blew the fuse over there or something. But oh well, folks. See, that's the beauty of a good editor. People don't even know that we had a technical difficulty there. So
yeah.
But
you were talking about e-scouting, and I was just going to say, I've using Go Hunt Maps, they've got some really cool features on there, but I've never used, and we've talked a little bit about the terrain analysis and using it, and I don't use it a whole lot for hunting purposes, as far as elevation bands, things like that. But man, for shed hunting, you can dial in.
Really?
Because most of the time, elk are going to be this time of year on a south or southwest facing slope, because that's the side that's getting the most sun. So that's where the first patches of green grass are going to be coming up this time of year. And you can, I've got a couple other resources for finding real-time satellite imagery, so you can actually see exactly where the snow line is and see the elevation of that, and then correlate that back to terrain analysis. And then you just plug in for this area, I want the elevation band between 4,800 and 5,800 feet with all south and southwest facing exposure. And that map, terrain analysis, highlights in green every little patch that falls into that. And it is money. It's right where the sheds are. So with us trying to find areas where there aren't boot tracks and then going to Wyoming for the shed hunting opener, I've been spending quite a bit of time and taking some screenshots of these little green patches. So when I get out in the field, I'm like, this is the X. This is where I'm heading to. And I bet there's a shed laying right here. So we'll see here in a few days how accurate it really is.
Yeah. Well, I drew a late rifle tag in Arizona with my son, and I'm looking at my e-scouting, and this is, I'm sure most people, if they looked over my shoulder, they would say something to the effect of, Randy, why don't you just mark the places where you aren't going to glass from? Because right now, my glassing icon is always a little yellow icon, and there's always a note, oh wow, this is going to be a good morning glassing spot, you will have this whole field to the northwest. I got so many places. I hope season is about 2 months long, because based on all the places I have marked on my map, if I did 3 spots a day, it'd take me about 2 months to cover them all.
But at that point, there wouldn't be a square inch of that unit that hadn't been covered by your binoculars, I bet.
Well, that's true. That's very true. And that's, with the late season, that's first week of December, it is a glassing game. That's all I do is glass. And a lot of people will comment or email and say, don't you get tired of glassing? No, not really. Because every so often you see an elk, or you see a deer, or you see, something. And to walk and hike as many miles as I can glass with my eyes would be impractical. And most of the time when I'm walking, my mind starts drifting, and I bump them and they run off, and then I bump them again and they run off, and I cuss a little bit and throw some dirt in the, and kick the dirt or whatever. And so it's just a very effective way to hunt late season elk. So
I have
really
a
hope.
question for you
Yeah.
regarding glassing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you take into account the direction that you are facing when you're glassing based on the time of day?
Oh yeah. That's
So that you aren't glassing into the sun?
Yeah, I'm always in. If you saw kind of the ribbons or I guess you'd call them rows, if you looked at it like a spreadsheet, I almost attack it from the south to the north all the time because we're in the northern hemisphere. I want to. The most effective glassing places will be when I can have the sun somewhere to my back or slightly to my back or to my, right shoulder or left shoulder, because you're just going to be way more effective glassing that way. Uh, there's a reason that you don't look into the sun if you want to have good vision, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, that's why you'll see when a lot of and I cover this in outdoor class in my rifle elk hunting glassing techniques, is in the morning, if at all possible, I like to have a place where I'm kind of looking northwest generally, because then I can look straight north. I can even look northeast and I still don't have the sun in my eye. And I can look from that northwest quadrant. Okay, then I can go over to the west and I can almost go southwest. So I got about 180 degrees out in front of me that I can glass before I start having penetration, ambient light coming in from the side. And then there's also a method to the madness of, okay, I know the slopes that face east are the ones that are going to get sunlight first in the morning. So those are the ones I'm really picking apart right away, because the elk there are going to leave there quicker. But slopes that face west when the sun's coming out of the east, those elk are going to stay out there longer. So I can get to those. I'll eventually get to those. But the first ones I want to glass, if I'm in a really good spot where I can't glass everything quickly, all right, what are the ones I want to pick apart first before knowing that the sun is going to expose those first? Because that's where the elk are. They're going to leave that earlier than they are a shaded west-facing slope. So there is a method to the madness of it, and I'm sure people think, oh, he just plops down and throws his binos up and starts looking around. No. And then in the afternoon, I kind of reverse it. I try to have a place where the sun is to the southeast. So how can I be looking kind of northeast? In the same rule applies, but a bit in reverse. Now the slopes that face east are going to get shaded first. So that's where the elk are going to come out first. So I'm looking at those ones until, the sun is way down when a west-facing slope finally gets shaded. So, yeah, every little icon is color-coded for morning glassing. This color's afternoon glassing, and they've got A, B, C, D. So when I say I'm on Plan K, that means I'm walking into waypoint K. All the other ones were duds. So, but that's, yeah.
No, when I was shed hunting, and I don't do a lot of glassing when I'm hunting. We're primarily
Archery, yeah.
we get into October, November, and it's a little more glassing, but even still, we're usually hunting a lot of the more timbered areas. So we're just looking at one opening on a hillside and not spending all day just scanning open areas. But shed hunting, you really want to cover as much country as possible. And like you said, you can cover so much more with the glass than you can hiking. Hiking's still a big part of it, but I noticed getting up onto a really high point, I had a good vantage point, but a lot of the hillsides that I wanted to glass were almost directly to my east. And first thing in the morning, looking that way, I was getting so much glare. There were shadows on that hill, so I couldn't, really clearly see what was on that hill. And as I turned and looked straight west, the sun behind me lit up that hillside so that everything on it just glowed and stood out. And there's so much more contrast in what I was seeing that I thought, I really should start thinking about the direction that I'm glassing in the morning. I need to be looking to the, like you said, the northwest, and then midday into the afternoon, I can start looking back at those other places, and they'll be lit up better, and it'll make my glassing that much more efficient for, just for looking for sheds. But then I got thinking, I bet for hunting, I bet Randy is strategic about the direction. And I hadn't even thought about, the hillsides that the elk are most likely to be on at different times of the day as far as which direction they face. So when you're glassing, having an order in that would be important as well.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe it's too much nerding out, but if anyone wants to check it out, your University of Elk Hunting course is out there on outdoor class. What I just walked through is one of the chapters in the rifle elk hunting class. Outdoorclass.com, promo code Elk Talk saves you 20%, I think, something like that. And you and I people don't know this. Well, they'll know it later on when it gets published later this summer, but you have sent the outline of the scripts for cow elk hunting, and we're going to try to get that one done. When are we filming that? First week of June?
First week of June, yeah. So
you
as
should
quickly
see
as they can turn it around.
Yeah, you should see. I need. Are you good at graphs, Corey? Like if I gave you a data set in Excel, could you create some really good graphs for me with multiple data sets?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I have all this data now in an Excel file, and our audience has been saying, when's Newberg going to release all this data? And it's all 52 weeks of the year. What the caloric demands are in a normal year on a cow elk, what the landscape provides that elk, and what the deficit or excess is. And then it also tracks if they were able to consume this many kilocalories each day, here's how much weight they would gain that week. And we start with a 450-pound cow elk, a 4-year-old cow elk. And I'm trying to show when she bottoms out. In other words, she gets to zero body fat. And what her peak is, or what she's trying to hit by mid-October, of 15% body fat. I've got it all charted in numbers, the matrix X and Y axis. But when I go, say, insert graph and I grab the data sets, I just suck at that. So maybe I'll send it
can help you with that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So
that would be a fun graph to see.
Yeah. And if I put these variables in there, and then another graph I've got charted is kind of the inverse of how elk in arid climates like, let's say Arizona, New Mexico, southern Utah, southern Nevada, how they have an inverse of what their thermoregulation demands are, where they're burning a ton of energy trying to stay cool in the summer, while the elk up in the northern latitudes, that's a huge weight gain period for them. And then as we get into winter, the temperatures moderate in those southwestern states. And so less energy is expended in thermoregulation for them, and they start getting fat. Whereas the northern elk are like, oh man, I hope I can get through the winter. I got 3 feet of snow I got to dig through. It's 10 below zero today. So there's almost an inverse of how elk have to thermoregulate, and what a huge energy drain thermoregulation is. A lot of people don't really think about that in the warmer periods. And I'm trying to equate it to, this is why it's so hard to find elk in September when it's 85 degrees or 90 degrees. This thermoregulation effort that they have to undertake says, I just got to lay here and pant like a hot dog, If they get up and start moving around and rutting hard when it's 90 degrees, we may not think of it this way, but they are going to burn so much energy and so much fat that the reserves they need to get through the winter are going to be gone. And they know that. They instinctively or intuitively, they understand that. So they wait until the sun goes down when it's September and it's 88 degrees because they know the thermal regulation energy demands at that time are way, way less.
And
That's
it's
how they got
probably, a place like Arizona. So I've hunted there a handful of times, and I've noticed in September that it is chaos in the morning, elk bugling everywhere. And then it's like a light switch goes off at 9:20 a.m. or whatever time it is. All the bugles just shut off, and you don't hear another bugle all day. And like you're saying, in those drier units in Arizona, and that's why, you come to Idaho or Montana or Wyoming, you can get a bull fired up at 1 o'clock in the afternoon sometimes.
Yep.
And makes complete sense that thermoregulating demand on them is different here than it is there. And they have to shut down because of the heat and because of what they lose if they get fired up in those climates. And the temperature might be the same in both places, but they're programmed to know that, hey, we've got to have a shutdown period here because historically and over a long period of time, if I do this day in, day out, I'm not going to have enough reserves to make it through winter.
Yeah, and there are parts of our landscapes that are considered diurnal climates. In other words, really warm days and afternoons and quite chilly evenings and mornings. And when you're talking about the, like Coconino, Kaibab, and Mogollon Rim country of Arizona, or the Great Basin states, you hear a lot of people who come out to those places. They're like, I can't believe how cold it got at night. It was 94 degrees, and then it got down to 42 that night. Yep, that's a diurnal climate. So that diurnal effect lasts longer into the morning. So you're going to have these elk be able to be more active and not hit that trigger point of thermoregulation in the morning more so than in the early, they come out 4 in the afternoon. No, it's still in these diurnal climates, the afternoon and evening periods stay warmer. And that probably explains some of the reasons why, if you're in one of those states with a diurnal climate, you're going to want to hunt more in the morning. Yeah. Because it takes a while for it to warm up. But once it warms up, it gets really warm. So.
Yeah, and here's another factor in those diurnal climates. We also have diurnal thermals, which means that twice a day the thermals change. And in a diurnal climate, when you have those drastic swings where it goes from 40 degrees in the morning, and as soon as that sun comes up and warms it up, it goes to a drastic 70 or 80 degrees change. Those changes, those transitions from where the thermals go from a downdraft to up are going to be a lot more violent. Yeah. Because it's a hard, sudden change. So you're going to get these big gusts of wind that come through at those transition times more than, in an area where it's a gradual, slow heat where you just kind of get a gradual transition there. So there's so many scientific components that go into all these things, so many little things that affect. Elk do it naturally. They've adapted. Right. It's an instinct to them that we need to be up and moving at this time because this is when our bodies will be the most efficient at not burning calories. We can get the most efficiency out of the calories that we eat. We also want to stay safe, so we need the wind coming in our face as we're moving at this time. I mean, all of these little factors contribute to why an elk is doing what it's doing, when it's doing it, and how it's doing it.
Yeah. And that's, for me, as someone who nerds out on this stuff, the hard part is making it relatable or giving here's the cause effect, here's the action reaction that we can use for our hunting success. And with cow elk being so forage intense, especially when people see the graph that you're going to help me somehow extract, they're going to realize why cow elk have the feed bag on so hard starting September 1st when lactation generally stops. And they've got about 6 weeks before they're pregnant. 4 to 6 weeks they'll be pregnant. And then once that calf starts needing nutrition, they got about another 2 to 4 weeks to put the weight on. And that's why in our hunting seasons, it is all about food and food and food and food. Because the rest of the year, they're either spending a lot of money, i.e. fat, to invest in this calf they're carrying. And then once that calf is born, you would think, oh man, they got it made. No, the demands of lactation are 2.5 times what the demands are for gestation. So for that 100 to 105 days of lactation from, late May to late August, that is their greatest nutritional demand on their body. So,
which is why they're so visible during the summer. You
Yeah.
can see elk, at
Yeah.
10 o'clock in the morning in a big green meadow still out there eating.
Yeah, because they got to do 2 things at this time of year in June, July, and August. They have to fulfill the needs of lactation, which bump them from 4,000 kilocalories a day to 6,000. So that's a 50% increase in demand over just their basic, maintenance plane of 4,000 kilocalories. So they got to satisfy that need, plus they have to put fat on. So the amount of kilocalories they have to take in a day and in a week is ridiculous. It's like
that's crazy.
Yeah. So I'm trying to make all that relatable to where you're going to find cow elk or why you're going to find cow elk doing what they're doing during the seasons we hunt them, September, October, November mostly. So hopefully I'm successful in that, but it's one of the hardest things I've ever tried to write. I have been working on this for so long, and now we got a deadline, right? We got to have our scripts ready by what, May 8th or something?
Yeah.
And I've got all kinds of text and stuff, but we're supposed to do this in 6 or 8 minutes per.
I was just going to say, I got the outline yesterday. I'm like, whoa, how are we going to go into as much detail as we want to, not only on the tactics of how to hunt a cow elk, but how to find them, going into all of this stuff that you've researched and then put it into the outline they want. It's
I'm thinking
really
of adding a chapter that said, if you just want to nerd out, watch this. It's a long chapter.
Yeah.
It may not flow very well, but this is the index or the whatever. But as I always say, if you want to understand a subject really well, try to teach it. And so we'll see how that goes. We've got so many demands for cow elk information that it's like, well, I'm glad we're doing it. So.
Yeah, and part of what I'm going to be covering there is the opportunity for hunting cow elk, which when you look at it, there is so much more opportunity. It's so much easier to get a tag for an antlerless elk. And that's why there's so much demand for it is, we spend a lot of time talking about hunting elk in the rut, specifically bull elk, and how to call them in. And that's the exciting part of it. But at the end of the day, if you're just wanting to hunt elk and you're wanting to put an elk in the freezer, there's typically 4 to 5 times as many cows as there are bulls, so a much more target-rich environment. There's a lot more opportunity to get the tags. It's a lot easier to get the tags, and so at the end of the day, for somebody that wants to be an elk hunter, an antlerless elk is the best target to focus on, and there's not a lot of information on how to hunt a cow elk. A lot of people talk about the tactics for bugling and all these different things, but how do you hunt a cow elk? So it'll be fun to dive into that and provide that resource.
Yeah. So hopefully people will get value out of that. I'm looking at how much that library is growing on Outdoor Class. It's getting to be a lot. I mean, it started with your University of Elk Hunting, and now I think they're working on Remy, his second class. Hank Shaw, they're working on his second class. My pronghorn class, John Barclay's class. It's been, lots of them out there. So that regardless of what you're signing up for, use promo code Elk Talk, and you're going to save money, whether it's Go Hunts, Insider, whether it's Outdoor Class, you name it. But before we get too far along, I am responsible for a whole volley of emails we got when on one of the prior podcasts. If I lived in Colorado, I would be changing the rules about how we can access our state trust lands. And I said, someday I'm going to lay out that roadmap. And if anybody wants to know how it works, just get a hold of me. Well, guess what?
A lot of people have got a hold of you.
I'm sure when you're getting those emails, because Corey forwards all the emails to me, Corey was probably thinking, Newberg, you and your big mouth, look at all this stuff here. So
no, it's just, and I didn't realize, I mean, I knew, when we hunted together in New Mexico, you can't camp on certain lands. I didn't realize until just a few years ago that in Colorado, you can't trespass on your own state-owned land. Yep. You can't hunt it. You can't, it's off limits. And I've just taken for granted being in Idaho that if it says state of Idaho land, it's my land. It's public land. And I didn't realize, and so it's been eye-opening to see not only how much land is locked up there owned by the state that the state residents and nobody else can access, but how many people that live in Colorado didn't even know, some of the details of that and what it would take to be able to put that back into public access.
Yeah. So since I brought up Colorado, I'm going to walk through how it happened in Montana and how Montana and Colorado were identical until the law got changed in Montana. But I might use Colorado as the example, but people need to know that only 13 of the 50 states allow public access on their state trust lands.
Wow.
That leaves 37 other states where there's not guaranteed access to your state trust land. So some people will say, what are state trust lands? So the simple way is to say they're the little powder blue sections when you look at a surface map. Well, how did they come to be? Well, every state since Ohio in, I believe, I can't remember when Ohio was, early 1800s. It was an act in Congress called the Northwest Ordinance, where states were given certain sections. So a township is 6 miles by 6 miles. So it's 36 square miles. And within a township, they number the sections 1 through 36 for each square mile. So it started out with the really productive lands in the East and the Midwest that the states were given a smaller percentage of each township. And when you became a state, the federal government said, we're going to give you these lands as the mechanism for funding your school system. So you have to hold them in trust by some designated body, and your trustees have to manage these lands, the proceeds which go to your school system. That was the deal.
They have to manage them in a way that maximizes that revenue that comes from those lands. I mean, they're bound legally to maximize the profits and the revenues from those lands.
Right, because these people who sit on this, I'll call it a land board, they are trustees. They have a trustee duty to the schools to get the greatest amount of profit possible from those lands. So the United States gets developed, and as you start getting out west, the states are starting, hey, it's really arid. It's the productivity of the lands aren't as much. So when Montana became a state in the late 1800s, the state of Montana received 2 out of every 36 sections. 36 sections. So in a township of 36 square miles, the state of Montana got section 16 and section 36. So people will be looking at a map and say, well, why the randomness of this, right? Well, that was how it came to be. And that that was the case. And then you got to Arizona and New Mexico, which are really dry states, Nevada, and they got even more than 2 out of every 36 sections. So that's the history of how all these states ended up with state trust lands, the powder blue stuff you see on your surface map. Well, a lot of the eastern and midwestern states, they actually sold those lands, and they took the proceeds and put it in state accounts to invest in other things. So a lot of states have very little state trust land left because they said, well, we'd rather sell these lands, take the proceeds, and put it in a trust account and manage it for, in today's world, we'd call it a stock portfolio. What they called it when they sold a lot of these lands in the 1800s and early 1900s, I don't know. But anyhow, that's why every state has a varying amount of state land. And
so some of those states just looked at it and said, we would rather manage money than manage land.
Yeah. So, but when they sold it, they couldn't just put that money in the general fund. They had to put it in an earmarked account specifically for the schools. So now most of the western states kept their state lands, with the exception of Nevada, which is a crooked story all in of itself. The Nevada legislature told the feds, we will give you back these $3 million if you'll let us handpick $2 million of really good ground, because in Nevada it's the most arid state in the country, and so they handpicked anything that had water, and that all happens. Well, then the politicians in Nevada, a state in its early days known for a little bit of corruption, they sold 90% of their state lands to friends of legislators for $1 an acre, $2 an acre. And so with the exception of Nevada, okay, most of the western states still have a large portion of these state trust lands. Now, the fact that only 13 states allow access to state trust lands is why I've said we need to look at where are these state trust lands in these other 37 states and figure out how we get access to them.
Do you know what the total number of acres is in those 37 states?
I don't, Corey. I should probably look that up, but I don't.
I was just thinking that'd be so interesting to see how many acres are locked up that could be public. Yeah, so I did research it for Colorado. And Colorado has 2.85 million acres of state trust land. Wow. That for the longest time, Parks and Wildlife paid a lease fee for about 500,000 of those acres. And then the state land board started getting enough heat that they said, okay, we'll lease the access portion to another 450,000 acres. So right now in Colorado, your Parks and Wildlife pays money to lease about 950,000 acres. Well, that leaves about another 1.8, 1.9 million acres that you don't have access to. So Parks and Wildlife, they lease state land which provides public access.
Right. So that money goes from one state agency to another agency or another land board that takes that money and uses it for schools. New Mexico has
the Park and Wildlife money come from that they lease that land?
License sales, excise,
Pittman
sales. Roberts and stuff like that.
So hunters are footing the bill for all public access then
to those state
basically.
Lines. Yeah.
So I mean, anybody can go on there now. Bird watchers, mushroom pickers, mountain bikers, anything like that. Are they footing any of that bill? Do they have to buy permits or access?
Not that I know of, but someone from Colorado will call in and say, "Oh, wait a second, there's a few details you're missing here." So I'm going to give general concepts to that. The majority of it, if not all of it, is coming from license fees and the associated matching. to those license fees that comes from Pittman-Robertson excise taxes. So Montana was the same exact way until 1994. And we couldn't access our state trust lands. But thanks to Jack Atchison Sr. and Tony Schunen Sr., they said, we got to solve this. We got to figure this out. Because Montana, we were talking over 5 million acres of state trust land. And hunters would be like, how in the heck do we solve this? How do we convince this land board how do we give them the offer they can't refuse? So they tried the legislative route, and they had some progress, but like most legislative efforts, you get somebody who gums up the works. And even though you get a bill passed, they use kind of funky language or whatever that excluded hunting from this opportunity. So at the time, we had a governor, Mark Roscoe, who said, you know what, this hocus pocus, this kind of splitting of hairs here, I'm going to form this state citizens committee. You guys are going to work with the state land board, and you are going to make sure the administrative rules of Montana that govern the state land board include hunting in this. So in effect, and this is the approach you'd take in Colorado or Nebraska next door, which has over 1 million acres of inaccessible state lands, you would go to your state land board and you would make them the deal they can't refuse. As a trustee, if you offer me a mechanism in Montana, what they came up with was a state recreation pass or a state lands recreation pass that is included in your hunting license now. But if you don't buy a hunting license, you can go buy the permit and other stuff. So if I'm a trustee and I'm sitting here and say, well, you guys are offering me $5 million of extra money for the school systems, how can I say no to that? Answer is you can't. Because if you say no, you're going to get sued because you as a trustee are not fulfilling your fiduciary duty. You've just said, I like how it is. Our schools are so overfunded. We don't need this $5 million or whatever the number would be. Do you know of any school systems that are so overfunded that millions of dollars wouldn't mean something to them?
I haven't heard of any.
No. When your schools are having bake sales and selling cookies to raise money for schools, that tells me that they're probably not underfunded.
Yeah.
So if I lived in Colorado, I would figure out where are the administrative rules within the state of Colorado that I could propose to them. Every citizen of Colorado, not just hunters, but anyone who wants to go hiking, bird watching, whatever, could pay $30 for an annual permit that would grant them access, non-motorized access to these state lands. Because in Montana, that's what it is, non-motorized unless there's a road through there. That'd raise millions and millions of dollars for the Colorado school system. And if you couldn't get it done at the administrative rule level, like we were able to get it done in Montana, you go to your legislature and you get that done.
That begs the question of the 900,000 acres that are currently being paid for by Parks and Wildlife.
Yep.
I don't even know how much it's costing them to lease 900,000 acres from the state every year.
Yep.
That money stays in Park and Wildlife for other wildlife funds. Interesting.
Yeah. So if you were a hunter, resident or non, because in Montana, there's one fee for residents and there's as always, we wrote the book on how to bury the needle in tapping out the non-resident. So a non-resident pays an even higher fee. But as a non-resident, if I had an elk tag or a deer tag and you told me it was $50 to buy a stamp or a permit that gave me access to 2.8 million acres, 2.9 million, whatever the number ends up being.
Yeah.
$50
no-brainer.
on top. I look at all the other costs I've got. This is like a no-brainer. Or if you're a resident, and I don't know what the number would end up being because Colorado has a much higher population than Montana. But I'm saying this is the roadmap. This is the model. It has worked in Montana. You in Idaho, you never adopted these crazy rules, so you guys are the gold standard of how state land access should be.
Well, we are on access, but now, we're facing where the state is being forced through legal processes to sell land to private owners.
Because it's not profitable.
Because there's more profit to be made by selling some of this land to a developer and then having that money to manage rather than managing, because they're losing money trying to manage the lands. If the forest fire comes through on state land to fight it, they've got to have so much money.
Right.
And so now we're facing that where developers are coming in and using the legislative system to force the state to sell their land because it's not profitable. And now we're looking at potentially losing public lands, moving into private holdings.
Yeah. So
another issue.
That's a whole nother issue of highest and best use is what these trustees have to look at. So your trustees in Idaho are saying, if we can relieve ourselves of this fire liability and we can sell it to a developer and throw some money in the account, why wouldn't we do that? Almost by mandate, by fiduciary responsibility, that's what we have to do. Well, the reason that they arrive at that conclusion is there's not other sources coming from those lands.
Yep.
And I know some of your Idaho residents might say, why would we pay $30 a year when we got it so good right now?
We got it for free because you're going to lose it.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't start paying something, you're going to lose it to developers or whatever enterprise can come and use these fiduciary responsibilities under these state land board arrangements to convince them to sell it to them.
Yep.
So, that is the roadmap that I think every state could follow. Go to your trustees, go to your state land board and say, what are you doing to maximize the recreation and access component of these lands? Okay, we get it. You're selling some timber. You're, getting royalties from oil and gas. You're selling some grazing rights. What about the access side of it? That could be worth millions and millions of dollars to our schools. You end up putting these trustees in a position where they have to make a rational, the standard placed on a trustee is reasonable and prudent. What would a reasonable and prudent person do if someone showed up and said, hey, I'll give you a $5 million check for the Colorado school systems, or $10 million or whatever the number would end up being? Would a reasonable and prudent person say, no, thanks, we're busy today?
We're making $110,000 a year from a cattle grazer, so why would we do that?
Yeah. So, and I know when I've raised this before on my Hunt Talk forum, I don't make a lot of friends in states like Colorado where people currently have exclusive use of those state trust lands.
Yeah.
And in fact, some of the threats, some of the emails have either stated or implied threats in them that Newberg, keep your nose in Montana. We don't need your BS down here. I get it. But my platforms and everything I do every day is about how do we increase public access. So if you live in Colorado, I'm going to tell you a big part of how you got from the 500,000 to the 900,000 was there is a guy, Tim Brass. Tim has been pushing this pretty hard, and he works for backcountry hunters and anglers. And that relieved a bit of this pressure, right? Hunters were saying, we want more access. We want more access. So the state land board's like, okay, we'll do this. Kind of, no, don't bother us. And I'm sure the people who struck that deal are going to be like, great. Now all we need is a bunch of, fired up hunters, anglers, recreationists showing up and wanting more. We gave you 450,000 extra. What more do you need? Well, how about all 2.8 million?
Yeah, and not just hunters and anglers. I mean, this
No.
benefits every resident
Everyone.
of the state. I mean, everybody should be behind it, with the exception of those who are currently profiting off of it.
Yeah, or benefiting it in some way. So I don't know of any way that I think about how much money we would have to raise to actually go and buy these lands.
Yeah.
Or equivalent lands. You know what it would cost to buy 2.8 million acres in Colorado that, averages probably $10,000 per acre, and people will probably laugh at me and say, you better.
Good luck finding some for 10,000 an acre.
So if it was 10,000 an acre, what's that? $28 billion it would cost. How are we going to raise $28 billion? We're not. So in this world of access that is getting harder and harder, and we're losing private land access, for me, it's a matter of where every time we pick some of the fruit, it's not quite as low hanging as it was before.
Yeah.
But across the 37 states that do not allow public access to their state lands, I struggle to find a place where we could do more for access, in the process help fund more money for our schools, and solve some of these checkerboard issues. Because a lot of these state lands, it's the reason they're being leased in some of these states isn't the 640 acres that is a section. It's the 10,000 acres that has locked up.
Yep.
So we're not just talking about.
That explains why we have the checkerboarding, because it was just a random every 16 and 32 section, or 16 and 36, whatever it is.
Yep.
So it's just checkerboarded across there with these little blue dots in, not necessarily a random pattern, but definitely not in a pattern that makes it contiguous and connected.
No. Right. And the way we ended up with the checkerboard of the BLM is in the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s, Congress granted the railroads every other section. So 18 out of the 36 sections in a township. But if we're talking about ways we're going to solve some of this landlocked parcel, some of this checkerboard parcels, this isn't going to solve all of it. But if you go look at your map, and you found these places where these powder blue sections touch a road, but then also touch a huge block of landlocked BLM or landlocked Forest Service, that's part of the reason why there's so much resistance to allowing the citizens of a state to access their state lands. So we got so many emails on it when I threw it out there. I'm like, all right, we got to carve out 15 or 20 minutes and give the Cliff's Notes version of what the roadmap would look like. And I can tell you that in Colorado, Tim Brass is still working on this issue. So I don't want to inundate Tim's emails, but for those of you who've asked, he's easy to find. If you go to their website, you'll see Tim Brass is one of the coordinators, whatever. And I bet you after this podcast drops, I'm going to get a call from Tim like, hey, can you give me a heads up next time you're going to do that? But whatever state agent or state organization or group you have that you can work with, think about if you could perfect a system where you now have access to state trust lands. Guaranteed. Like, no doubts about it. No tricky stuff. No funky stuff. No good old boy who knows this person or who knows that person. This is a mechanism that you put the pressure on your state land board where they have no choice. And if they say, well, $20 per resident isn't enough, okay, we'll do 30. All right, non-residents, guess what? You're going to do 50 or 60. Pretty soon you will get to a number where they have no choice. And if they decline that, you have a legislature where you should go and say, these people are not following their trustee duties. They are ignoring it to the detriment of our schools.
Crazy. That's got my wheels spinning. We've got access here in Idaho, but I already see the writing on the wall. We're going to lose that land. I mean, they're already being mandated to come up with a development plan, to come up with plans to sell a certain amount of land each year to be able to maximize the revenue from it. And we're going to lose land. And so if we come up with a plan that says, hey, what if recreationists, residents and non-residents, pay a nominal fee for these lands? I mean, it stinks because we're getting it for free right now. So I can see, 99% of the residents not understanding, whoa, we already have it for free. Why would we pay for it? Well, it's a small price to pay to be able to guarantee access in the future where it's not going to get sold off and we end up like Nevada with only 4% of our land left.
Yeah. So in your state, Corey, which lands do you think are the ones that people are going to want to get their hands on as deeded private land? The sagebrush ground out there and, south of Twin Falls, or the section that ties up access to another 8,000 acres of BLM or Forest Service land in Sun Valley or Swan Valley,
right here where I live?
Yeah. Which state sections do you think someone's gonna try to leverage? Because if they buy 640 acres that controls access to 8,000 acres, that's a pretty darn good deal.
Yep.
So people might say, "Oh, that's not happening." That is happening, folks.
Oh, we're seeing it. I mean, right here where I live, the developers came in and said, we want this. It's prime development land, and the state's not making any money on it right now. So they're fiducially responsible to sell it to us. I mean, they're legally bound to sell this land. So come up with a plan of how you're going to sell it and distribute it, because it's not making money right now.
Yep. So that is, when I say that's the roadmap, what I'm talking about is forcing the hand of your state land board to give them the deal they can't refuse. It's not, they can't refuse it because they're nice folks. It's they can't refuse it because they have a fiduciary obligation to raise as much money from these lands as they possibly can for these schools.
Yeah. And if they do try to deny it, there is a legal process to be able to go through to say, you can't deny this. Legally, you have to grant this because we are offering you money.
Yeah. And if folks in their state get wound up about this and make an effort and they accomplish it in 5 states of the 37 that currently don't allow state, recreation access to state trust lands, well, that's still 5 states. And if that accumulates to 5 million acres, well, that's 5 million acres that we now have access to on those grounds that are owned by the state, plus whatever access it grants to landlocked parcels. So I don't know what that number would be. But where else are we going to open up 5 million acres? With the effort of some people just working at it. In Montana, it took about 6 years to get it done. It shouldn't have taken that long.
I was just going to say, this seems like something that you could scratch out on a napkin and take to them and have them say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Why haven't we thought of this before?
Yeah, so I'm sure any state land board trustees, whether elected or appointed, in the West are going to be like, where the hell did all this pressure come? Who's stirring the nest here? Well, we
may find out we have more than 2 listeners on our podcast.
Well, based on the number of emails we got from folks, especially in Colorado, or even in other states, who said, how do I figure out what's going on in my state? Well, go to your state land board and find out. If we could see that get accomplished in the next few years, that's a huge win for access when we're losing access in so many places. So that's that's a big push on my platforms this year. Marcus and I have laid out how we talk about this in some of our hunts, in some of our, in this podcast, in my other podcasts, and because
You need to come up with just these little 5-minute infographic videos that even somebody like myself can understand and then explain. That would be so powerful. Just we got to do that.
Yeah. Okay. I'll work on
we'll
that.
take this off top or offline here, but that's I'm just looking. I mean, some of us who have it, the 13 states that have access to it, I doubt any of those states have guaranteed access to it.
No.
I mean, it could be sold tomorrow because somebody legally forces the hand of the land board to sell it because it's not making a profit. They can say, this piece right here, you show us how much money you're bringing in on it. It's like, well, actually, we can't harvest any more timber from it because we've harvested all the timber we can. It's sitting here. It's a liability. And they're like, then you legally have to sell it to me.
Right.
And as a fiduciary, they're responsible to do that because that's the only way it's going to make money. So if we aren't proactive and don't get out ahead of that, pretty soon we're going to notice, well, this, 640 acres just disappeared. Well, it's not a big deal. We still have another 10,000 over here or something. We're going to start seeing that disappear because the value of the land is going to outweigh any revenue that can come in unless we come up with a system to protect that.
Yeah. In New Mexico, every few years, I can't remember if they're on a 2 or 5 year lease between the state land board and their game and fish department. But you can't camp on state lands in New Mexico. You can only access them. And the reason you can is because your state wildlife agency is writing a big check. And that check I think it doubled a few years ago when the new lease came into effect. Well, we're talking millions of acres of access in New Mexico. If I was in New Mexico, I would be working on a way to perfect that. In other words, forcing the hand of the land board that you have to continue to allow access because we're paying this amount into the state school system. Even though, like your state of Idaho, some residents might say, why would we pay for it? We get it for free. You don't get it for free right now. Your state agency, your state wildlife agency is paying a ton of money. So if you spread that out over all citizens of your state and even non-residents who wanted to come there and recreate, and you institutionalize this mechanism of paying a fee, now you put that money back into the coffers of your state wildlife agency, and now you have a formal process by which the future of access in New Mexico is pretty much guaranteed on these state lands.
So this is, the wildlife agencies in a place like New Mexico or, wherever it is, they're paying for this.
Mm-hmm.
And that money is coming from hunters and anglers only. Yep. Is there any contribution coming from other sources?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah. And on top of that, is there anything prohibiting anybody from accessing that land? It's not just hunters that get to access that land, is it?
In New Mexico, the answer is it is only hunters.
So if you don't have a hunting license or a habitat stamp or whatever it is that is purchased through the game and fish, you don't get to access it.
Nope, correct. So
if I was a non-hunter, I would be concerned about that and wanting access for everyone and willing to pay. And so,
So
like you said, there's a process there. We got to perfect it.
Yep. So starts with your state land board, starts with those trustees. And if they won't do what you need them to do, well, you go tell on them. you be a tattletale. You tell them, we have this legislative body that is probably going to spank you if you don't do this. Or me as a state citizen, I could sue you. Or my school districts could sue you. Because you are in effect telling all of our school districts, we don't need that money. Special ed, better books, better technology for our school systems. I guess we're still going to be on rotary phones and, the old Commodore 64 computers or something.
Not to mention our underpaid
teachers
instructors and teachers.
Yeah. So that's the roadmap, folks. Go get them. And if I can be a resource, I'm happy to do that. You know, I got the benefit of watching some true giants of conservation in Montana pull this off. They didn't give up. They started in 1988. They were told no. In the 89 legislative session, they were told no. 91 legislative session, they were told no. 93, we kind of get a little bit of a fix, but through the funkiness of how they did things, it annoyed our governor at the time, Governor Roscoe, where he said, you know what, this kind of hocus pocus whack-a-mole stuff, no, we're going to sort this out. And to his credit, he put together a really good group of people who worked with the land board to get it straightened out. And since then, we've been paying millions of dollars into our school system. And you spread that out over the, hundreds of thousands of Montanans who want to recreate, or non-residents who want to recreate. And it's been a huge plus for our school system. And we know if that is state trust land, that little powder blue section, we have access to it and access to any BLM or Forest Service land connected to it.
So does every resident of Montana pay? Is it a tax? Is it a permit?
It's part of your license fee if you are a hunter. And then there's another portion called the recreational access permit that you can pay the same amount that's added to our hunting licenses. If you don't hunt, but you just want to go and hike, be a photographer.
So then do they get a sticker to put in their window?
Yep. They get a little permit that you print out and you keep on you. So if someone says, hey, what are you doing out here? Oh, I'm recreating. I paid my $20.
Because in Idaho, we have a state park permit. We pay $10 or whatever it is, and a little sticker goes in our window, and we can just go to all the little state parks and have a picnic or launch a boat or whatever it is.
Yep.
It would be really easy to implement in a state where anybody who wants to access state lands pays for a permit, and a little sticker goes in your window. Or if you're a hunter, it's it's notified on or it's indicated on your license. And
yep,
interesting.
Man, so
you're so educational, Mr. Newberg.
Now this is the can of worms that we're going to work on this year and next year. And then the next can of worms we're going to open up is in a farm bill that's coming up in Congress. There has been this thing called VPA, Voluntary Public Access, and a HIP, Habitat Improvement Program, where if landowners enroll in CRP and other federal programs, they can get paid some extra by allowing public access. And some states have really caught on to this, and they're opening up hundreds of thousands of acres of private land access through the VPA program. And one of these podcasts, we're going to have to talk about that and how you need to be weighing in on your representative and your senator to say, keep the funding for VPA and HIP in the Farm Bill. Because if we lose that, we're going to lose probably over 1 million acres of public access that we have right now. We can't afford to lose 1 million acres of public access.
No.
So it's in there, and it needs to stay in there. So, but that one's a little bit more of a, harder one.
I was going to say it's not the lower hanging fruit like the state trust lands. That seems like a no brainer. I'm going to look into more. And I mean, we've got a good system, so I certainly don't want to, put any ripples in that. But at the same time, I want to look ahead 20 years, 30 years, and make sure that we've got something in place that's going to protect that, so that when I'm too old to go out and access it, I know that there's people who are still young and energetic, that they're going to have a place to access public land.
Yeah. So anyhow, we'll, if anyone, what's the email address for the Elk Talk Podcast?
Well, there's not an email address, but they can go to elktalkpodcast.com, the website, click the contact link, and there's a form there that they can type in their subject and type a long message to us. Some of those messages get really, really long.
They do.
For the most part, they're filled with good details. So they can do that and then hit submit, and it comes straight to Randy and I.
Yeah. So we'll continue to try it, to whatever level we can. We want to be a resource. You and I live in 2 states where we have great access to our state trust lands, but that's not the case everywhere. And we know there's solutions to be had. And however we can help in getting that word out or being a resource of ways to do it. If I don't know it, I've worked with enough people that I probably know someone in that state that would be a better resource than I could be. And I'm happy to connect folks to do that. So.
Yeah. And this just seems like such a non-controversial thing that almost everybody should be behind. I mean, it's something we can all agree on, regardless of political affiliation or anything. It's, hey, everybody wants access to this, and we don't want to see it go away. This should be something that should be met with very little resistance, I would think.
You would hope so, but I'm here to tell you.
I know. There's going to be a few.
There are folks who are like, wait, no. I right now, this is my little corner of paradise. I don't want to see this change. And they know a legislator, or they know the governor,
Yeah.
But
legally, it doesn't matter who you know. I know the state Supreme Court.
Yeah.
At least I know where they exist and what their job is. So,
yeah. And if I'm a state trustee, the last thing I want to see is my name on the letterhead of a lawsuit because I said our schools were so overfunded. I'm not willing to listen.
Yeah.
Really? You want to be that person? You want to be that legislator? You want to be that governor? So, if you want to be that person, well, just come on down.
Yeah, just come on down. Just how big a boy are you?
Yeah. So, I've been doing a lot of research on this over the last year because I'm so concerned where we're losing access. I've prioritized a whole bunch of places that I think are the lowest hanging fruit to improve access. And this is the lowest hanging fruit in terms of the amount of acreage it would open up and perfect access for however long into the future with still a lot of work, but the least amount of work. So, yeah. I think we've kept long enough, Corey.
Yeah. And we talked very little about elk hunting stuff, but this is directly related to elk hunting and the future of elk hunting. So if you're an elk hunter and you didn't get excited about some of this information, then you live in a state that's got it really good. And
the reason I use Colorado is Colorado hosts more non-resident elk hunters than all the other states combined.
Yep.
And I don't know any non-resident elk hunter. I'm sure there's some who would say, just another fee, blah, blah. I'm not paying $50.
Yeah.
Okay. If you can't afford $50 to improve access to 2.8 million acres, then you probably can't afford to come to Colorado as a non-resident elk hunter.
Yep.
Or you just wake up every morning and say, I want to be mad, and I'm not happy till you're not happy.
And I'm going to wait just a minute. Here's something. I'm going to be mad about this today.
Yep. Yeah. The saying that I have is, do we want to fight or do we want to win? Some people just want to fight. They don't care if they win. They're just like, I want to fight. Boy, that's a lot of fun. I like fighting. I want to win. Okay.
Every time.
And sometimes you got to fight in order to win, but I'm here to win. And if we can, let's say that over the next 5 years, we were able to roll 5 more states into allowing access to their state trust lands, that would be a win in my mind.
Yep.
Because, like I said, not just those little powder blue pieces you see on your map, but all the other landlocked parcels that they provide access to. And I know if some of the people in Colorado who have lit me up before listen to this podcast, or someone shares this podcast with them, they're going to light me up big time. I don't, that falls under my grandma's old saying, as you've mistaken me for someone who cares about your hurt feelings. Don't waste the bits and bytes of email code to send me an email lighting me up, because really, you've mistaken me for someone who cares about hurt feelings when it comes to access. And that's what I get up to do every day. And this has been one we've been working on for a couple of years to try to figure it out. I do have some numbers on some of the states, and that's why I throw Nebraska out there. Nebraska has a ton of state trust land, and they don't have access to it right now. It's over 1 million acres just in Nebraska. And now the Nebraska farmers and people who have exclusive pheasant access or deer hunting access are going to be like, who is this guy? I'm driving to Bozeman. I'm going to put a knot on his head. Stand in line. I think you'd be number 54 right now. The line's long.
Call in 54? Man.
Well, that's when I quit counting.
Gotcha.
And people probably don't realize how many threats you get when you are out there in the public eye. I'm coming to Bozeman. I'm going to whoop your ass. And I just say, here's my address. Here's my phone number. Call me so I can make sure I'm there. I'd hate for you to just show up when my wife is home, Then you'd try to kick our dog or something. So I don't know what to tell people, If people think that that's somehow going to change my way, I've had my butt whooped enough times that another 3 or 4 wouldn't hurt. So,
and you're still going to wake up tomorrow wanting to fight and win.
Yeah, we're here to win. So I think these kind of things, we as hunters and anglers and outdoor recreation people, we got to focus on where are the wins, where are the victories that we can have. And we might have to get in some spats and some struggles and some battles along the way, but let's make sure we're winning. Let's not just fight to fight. So anyhow, we better let them go, Corey. We kept them almost 2 hours today.
Yeah.
I got 2 for the price of 1.
Yeah. That conversation, though, seemed to go a lot faster than some other conversations. That was just good information. And
really?
I mean, you've enlightened me, and I know a little bit about our state trust lands, but I mean, I'm going to do some more research, find out where the money comes from, how much is generated, why developers are so, I mean, I know they're so interested in it, but what it would take to thwart their efforts for many, many years to come so that we can make sure we don't lose what we have. And that might take, a little bit of a sacrifice from each of us, paying a little bit more that we aren't currently paying to guarantee that we don't lose it.
Yep. But you know what? That's kind of where we're at. Yep. We gotta, we can't just say, oh, well, because we're good folk. No.
Yeah.
It
doesn't work.
Pay. Yeah. So
awesome.
One left. Well, I don't know I don't know what a sleeve of cigarettes costs or a 12-pack of beer. I don't imbibe in any of that, or a roll of snooze or something. But I know what it costs to fill up my truck, and for a whole lot less than it costs to fill up my truck, I would bet in a lot of these states you could perfect that access.
Yeah.
So, all right, Corey.
Or a couple dilly bars a month.
Nah, hey, no.
Now we're getting a little personal.
No, I'd give up some dilly bars or some blizzards, definitely. So, but
excellent.
Well, you have a great day, and we'll look forward to some of these. What are you calling them? Mini podcast, mini series about your
it's a little mini series. We're calling it Reaching Your Peak. So the goal is to hopefully help people become better elk hunters through whether example of success or example of failure. But we're going to share some ideas and some tactics that contribute to success, and excited to do that. So first episode will be out here in 1 week.
All right. Well, you have a great day, Corey.
You do the same. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for being here, folks.